It's an ecosystem meeting. We want participants from all corners of the market to be there, to hear what's happening, and then generate new ideas about how to dramatically expand the amount of carbon removal activity that can happen. Because obviously we need that. Without carbon removal as a key part of the net zero strategy, net zero is out of reach.
Carbonsations, today's carbon industry leaders.
This episode is brought to you by Puro.Earth, the world's leading standard focused solely on carbon removal that durably stores carbon from the atmosphere. Welcome to the Carbonsations podcast, where we speak to some of the leading figures in the emerging carbon industry. We're joined today by Alvin Lee, head of supply at Puro.Earth, the world's first carbon crediting program focused exclusively on carbon removals. Alvin, thank you so much for being here. It's wonderful to have you on the show, and I really can't wait to get into all the exciting things that Puro is up to right now. But before we do, we have a tradition on this podcast to first get to know our guests a little bit better. So I know that you have a very impressive career so far, so I'd love it if you could tell us more about it.
Hi, good day, Violet. Really a pleasure to be talking to you today, and thank you so much to Carbon Herald and also the Carbonsations podcast for having me. Now, regarding your question about the journey, happy to tell you about how I wound up at Puro. So my background actually originally is in mechanical engineering, so I did have some time in the automotive sector. But I was also interested in the broad field of risk management back in the day. And that's actually the initial career that I embarked upon into risk management. And I mentioned this because, initially risk was looking at markets, but over time, risk analysis became very company-centric. And this was quite important because in the 2000s, there was a growing trend to look at environmental and social and governance risk of individual companies. And so at the time, I was at a company called RiskMetrics, which was a spin-off company from JP Morgan. And what we were able to do at RiskMetrics was we saw that there was this growing ESG focus, and we had the opportunity to work with two real pioneers in the space, which were Innovest as well as KLD. And in that process, we were able to integrate more and more ESG thinking into the risk management process. So that was a really fun part of the journey. Over time, an opportunity opened up for me at S&P Global, where I was able to get involved with a number of their businesses, but in particular, their environmental registry business. So this was the business which still exists today, focusing on enabling Article 6 type of transactions between countries, but also linking in the exchanges that we thought would be critical to that overall process. And it was through that experience that I had more and more contact with carbon standards and registries, and Puro immediately popped up onto the radar as far as standards that were doing interesting things. And so that's what led me to Puro. I was really fascinated by what the co-founders Antti and Mariana were doing. I reached out to them, and luckily there was an opportunity to help them in Asia. So I started doing that back in 2022. It's really fun to be in this market. I get to leverage some of my engineering and science interests, but also experience working with financial markets. And of course, now bringing that into the climate space. I've also had the opportunity to shift roles a bit actually at Puro. So I'm still based in Asia, and I have been focused on the region for 3 years now. But now I'm working with our global supply team. So I'm managing the team where we have representatives not only in Asia and Australia, but also the EU, Canada, and the US, where we look out for and onboard the most exciting CDR companies on the planet. So it's a fantastic opportunity. I'm really excited to be doing that now.
Excellent. So you're definitely one of the people to speak to as far as getting kind of a global view of the CDR market. So to get a better understanding, or to give our listeners a better understanding of Puro, as someone in such a key position at the company, how would you describe its role in the voluntary carbon market today?
So Puro.Earth is the leading crediting platform and standard, which is focused exclusively on science-based durable carbon removals. So that's our very clear focus. And as part of our role as a standard and a registry, we certify carbon removal activities. And we do that by first establishing rigorous methodologies for what constitutes carbon removal, or CDR. And then we look for companies that are aligned to one of the methodologies within our standard. And when we identify those companies and we work with them, they are eventually able to, after they pass audit with an independent entity and BBB, they would eventually be able to issue what we refer to as CO2 removal certificates, or CORC for short. So corks are the unit of measurement and trade in the Puro standard. And we are on the lookout for companies that can issue corks, and hopefully in aggregate would be millions of corks and eventually billions of corks per year. But that's what we focus on. As far as the broader function of Puro as a standard and registry, I mean, we view ourselves and we take this responsibility very seriously as a trusted layer between what we refer to as cork suppliers, but also CDR buyers and the market overall, because it's extremely important for us to ensure that there's high integrity, transparency, and traceability in the carbon removal markets. To support this mission, we're very fortunate to be backed by NASDAQ. The NASDAQ is our majority shareholder since 2021, but we still have a very strong relationship with our founders and incubators, which was Fortum from the Finnish utility sector, and they remain a minority shareholder. And together with our shareholders and all of our stakeholders, we're working globally across all different CDR pathways. We started out in several, including biochar and what we refer to as geologically stored carbon. But over time, we got involved with more specific implementations of geologically stored carbon, in particular, direct air capture and storage, or DACS. Increasingly, we're very active in the bioenergy and CCS space, or BECCS. And we continue to do work in what we refer to as carbonated materials. We also were the very first standard to launch enhanced rock weathering, or ERW, in 2022. And we have worked on further upgrades of that, as well as other methodologies. And we're always on the lookout, in collaboration with our independent advisory board, to identify new pathways, and hopefully those will become future methodologies that we would be able to add into Puro standard.
Excellent. Thank you. If I may, Alvin, I'd like to get your bird's eye view on the VCM, so to speak. We know there's growing momentum, but it's also apparent that there's a fair amount of uncertainty in the voluntary carbon markets. Can you talk us through the global state of CDR, the way you see it, and perhaps get into some of its main challenges?
We certainly recognize that the broader global voluntary carbon market is facing various challenges. So that's clear. We, within the carbon dioxide removal part of the market, or the CDR market, we view ourselves as one particular part of the global VCM. And our observation for CDR markets would be the following. So firstly, we actually see quite strong momentum on both sides of the market. And what I mean by that is there is, of course, a very robust supply ecosystem and scene. So people are working on all different kinds of methods, including all the ones that I listed earlier. And they're innovating in those spaces and growing the available CDR supply. At the same time, on the demand side too, we've been very fortunate in the CDR part of the VCM to see leading pioneer buyers continue to pave the way and show demand signals. Of course, that has been coming from the technology sector, but we also see that coming from the financial services sector, from the professional services sector, leading brand companies. And it's very encouraging to see that there is growing activity from the transportation markets, both aviation as well as maritime. So it's fantastic to see that broadening of demand to new sectors in the market. So those are the developments. And again, just to emphasize on the supply part, it is biochar, it's DACS, it's BECCS. Now it's enhanced rock weathering. We see pioneers in the carbonated materials space, as well as terrestrial storage of biomass, or TSB. So it's really exciting to see great companies and looking at all these different methodologies, which are part of Puro standard, and seeing them launch and scale and make connections with the demand side. And again, as I mentioned earlier, we certainly hope that there'll be new methodologies added, and that those companies would grow new segments. So that's what we see that is positive. Now, what are some of the challenges, since you asked about that? Well, it is, of course, well known that CDR as a service, and as reflected in unit prices of corks, is quite a bit more expensive than other forms of credits in the VCM. So in general, we're talking about in the CDR space, and keeping in mind, CDR is a form of emissions cleanup, right? It's a solution that is looking to directly draw down CO2 from the atmosphere, whether directly or indirectly through biomass. But it's a cleanup, and it's always very expensive to clean up. And so that's why you see prices consistently today well in excess of $100 or 100 euros in CDR markets. And so in order to build these kind of solutions, it is also quite costly. It's an infrastructure development. And so I mentioned this because although we are doing our job to make sure that there's trust in this market, where people understand that the methods are robust, the verification in partnership with VVDs is robust and inspires trust. So we focus on that. But in order to make all these things work, you need capital. So we are encouraged to see that there are different pools and forms of capital out there to flow into these projects. And we see that in all forms. We see support from the early stage or venture kind of financing part of the market, but it's also very encouraging to see more mature funds, even all the way up to sovereign wealth funds are having some support for CDR projects. And then, of course, depending on the situation, especially if a supplier manages to get offtakes, they are able to crowd in support from the banking sector. So various forms of structured debt or structured finance. So that's critical, but we need to see more of that because it is still somewhat of a capital constrained market. And so the more that pioneer buyers can step in, the more that new sectors can get involved with CDR. We think that, will work to bring in new capital. Of course, that we're trying to get on this positive upward spiral where supply ingenuity, supply of capital, and proven demand all work together to grow this market. So that's what we're trying to solve for and address these challenges. But I'm quite hopeful that that's happening. And then maybe final thing I'll say is that since you started off by asking about challenges in the VCM, we would observe that scrutiny of the VCM continues to be high and in a way is intensifying. But we welcome that, right? That's pushing the market and CDR players in particular to be, at the cutting edge of the science, at the cutting edge of showing that the solutions are durable, highly reliable. And we're trying to do our part to ensure that there's high transparency, consistency in what we're doing, to again inspire trust and confidence in the market. So we welcome that, but it takes a lot of work and a lot of energy from all the players involved that I just mentioned, and that's what we're tackling in the VCM today.
Speaking of support, how critical do you see political support for CDR as it stands? And maybe on the flip side of that, do you see corporate demand rising to the point where it can scale this industry even without political support?
Of course, policy support is always welcome, right? Because ultimately, it would give various forms of improved financing. That's one way to look at it. And so if it exists, it's of course welcome, right? So we have seen that in the West in various forms. We see that in the EU, for example, in various kinds of support for bioenergy with CCS and VEX. We're seeing mobilization of support in terms of policy and funding in continental Europe as well, because they see that carbon removal will be an important part of the future solution.
And what else would you say distinguishes the APAC region right now in terms of carbon removal development?
Yeah, well, if we're now focusing a bit more on APAC, several things. So I would broadly, we've already talked about policy. So I think I would like to highlight what we observe happening in the supply space, what's happening in the demand space, and then what we observe in terms of finance and investment. So in all these three areas, I must say I'm quite startled by how far the Asia Pacific region has come during the past 3 years that I've been directly involved in the space with Puro, as well to some extent what I observed while I was still at S&P. So starting with the supply space, I mean, we've always had the thesis that there would be enormous comparative advantages of generating CDR services in Asia Pacific. And I think if you just look at recent news, it's very clear that it is happening. So let's start with the X Prize. So X Prize winners were all announced earlier this week, and it was truly heartwarming to see. Mati Carbon, who are operating in India, ERW solutions, they won the X Prize. And so that, I think, is fantastic, underscoring of the potential that India has in particular in ERW. And you see a number of other companies involved in the space there, including, of course, Alt Carbon in the Darjeeling area, and also Varaha, which is involved with multiple types of CDR projects, but they also have ERW happening in India. So that's one thing that we're seeing. Moving to other kinds of solutions, biochar. So again, huge strides are being made in biochar carbon removal in Asia Pacific. So recent transactions that were notable to us included Varaha securing multi-year 100,000 pound offtake from Google. And that's really impressive. And that builds upon Varaha's already existing experience generating corks from one of their other projects. So we're also really excited to see important strides being made by Alcom, Puro.Based energy company, and they continue to be active in biofuels market. But several years ago, they embarked on biochar production, working with rice mills in Philippines. And so that project has been very successful, and they got onto the radar of the Global Green Growth Institute, or GGGI. And through extended work with GGGI and a lot of contact with stakeholders in the Philippines, it was announced last month that Alcom would be receiving various forms of support with GGGI and all of its member countries, totaling, I believe, close to $50 million to help them scale their solutions, which benefit communities, but also remove carbon via biochar in the Philippines. So it's an amazing result, and we're really happy to see projects of that nature grow and seeing the kind of funding that's flowing into that. We also are seeing, heading north now, we just certified our first Chinese biochar carbon removal project, which is a project within the Miotech portfolio of projects. So that's their first one for biochar carbon removal, and we see that they have the potential to dramatically expand their pipeline as well. Heading towards Australia, we're also really encouraged to see a lot of visibility for biomass projects in Western Australia. So it was announced this week that Biomass Projects would be collaborating with Residual, which is the US and London-based project development firm. And we'll also have MRV support from Carbon Future in a very large, important transaction and development. We continue to see exciting work by BioCare Projects, a Sydney-based developer, but doing work in South Australia as well as many other parts of the world. And so the supply side is indeed as exciting as we had anticipated it would be when we embarked upon this Asia Pacific drive 3 years ago. Of course, I also want to point out some of the bleeding edge kind of technologies that we see in the region. So it's really great to see Equatic, which has its roots in UCLA as well as UC Davis. The science that's coming from there is now being built in partnership with the water utility, a water agency in Singapore called PUB. So Equatic is currently working on that facility where they will be essentially doing direct air capture, but with ocean storage of the CO2 in their unique system. And we've been working very closely with them on defining a methodology for that, which we have codenamed DACOS, or DACOS, direct air capture with ocean storage. Wow, so that's happening right here in Singapore. We hope that will, of course, be successful and could scale up to be a larger facility in Singapore. And I think it's quite straightforward to see how that could be done in other parts of Asia, but of course, can be done in the EU and North America as well. So that's what we see on the supply side. Now, going to the demand side, increasingly very exciting environment in Asia Pacific. So, I mean, for some time now, we have had Mitsui OSK Shipping Lines, or MOL. They have been one of the 5 initial anchor members of the next-gen CDR facility, which, of course, is advised by Mitsubishi Corp as well as South Pole. South Pole, of course, being in turn supported by Gen Zero, investment company linked to the Singapore government. So they've been an early mover in terms of being a member of the First Movers Coalition at WEF and being part of NextGen. And they've capped it all off this week with a major commitment to Climeworks corks. So to my knowledge, this is the first time that the maritime sector has directly purchased corks from Climeworks. So really amazing development, and it happened this week. And of course, this was preceded, I think, a few weeks back by Mizuho Bank becoming the 6th member of the Next Gen CDR purchase facility. And so it's great to see that now 2 of the 6 members are from Asia Pacific, and both from Japan. We, of course, hope to see other movers, early movers in the space. And I should, of course, recognize that All Nippon Airways has been involved with the DAX sector as well. And we would also observe that Japan Airlines has had various kinds of involvement in CDR, including financial support to Captura in the US. So a lot of exciting things happening on the demand side, and we hope for more, and we'll be looking out for that.
It absolutely does sound exciting. It sounds like Asia Pacific is absolutely bustling with life as far as CDR goes, from supply, demand, finance, from every side, so to speak. But that brings us to one of the most exciting events this year, the upcoming APAC CDR Summit, which will be taking place in Singapore on May 7th, which is just days away. The event is hosted by Puro.Earth and supported by the Carbon Business Council. Why is now the right time for this event, and what has changed since last year's gathering?
Yes, happy to share our view on this. So actually, this will be the second time that Puro is helping to organize a CDR summit in this region, and we have participated in some as well. So we've organized. This will be our second one that we organize in Singapore, but we've actually participated in some third-party events in Japan. So it's really encouraging to see specialized CDR events happening in the space. I would note that last year, we decided to go ahead and do that because, of course, we continue to see very important work happening in energy transition, as well as energy efficiency initiatives in Asia Pacific, and that continues. But we decided last year that, we wanted to highlight to the market how CDR, or carbon removals, is an important strategy that should sit alongside the energy transition, as well as energy efficiency drives. So we did that. I think, were quite successful in generating awareness about CDR and getting some of the early movers involved. And so now, fast forward 1 year, we were, I think, pretty confident that the second edition would take things to further heights. And as we just talked about, with all the exciting opportunities and events that have taken place in the supply, demand, and financing perspective in Asia Pacific, we were pretty confident that the second edition would really make CDR much more mainstream and try to crowd in a new type of participant into the market. Because although there's exciting things happening, we still always need new ambitious suppliers. We need new corporates who will step in and generate CDR demand, and of course, need more capital flowing into the space. So that's our goal. Standard Chartered hosted us last year, venue-wise last year, and they were very kind to support us again this year. And then this year we had the additional fortune where we were in touch with Carbon Business Council, and they were thinking about what are things that they could do in the Asia Pacific region. So we decided to collaborate on that. So that's really exciting. Great to be working with Ben Rubin at CBC on this initiative. And we certainly do hope to host members of Carbon Herald at the event, time permitting, on your side.
Definitely looking forward to that.
Yeah, super. Thank you. As far as what to expect this year and what may be different. So again, we have been fortunate to see that there are a lot of developments on the supply, demand, and financing space. So this will be an occasion for us to talk about all that. Because while CDR-centric people know these things, it's still not quite mainstream knowledge to the broader corporate and financial communities. So our goal in running this second summit, and in a much bigger way, this time in collaboration with Carbon Business Council, is to really try to impress upon the corporate sector and the financial sector what is happening in carbon removal, how it is a unique part of the voluntary carbon market, and why it's such an important solution set that needs to sit alongside core decarbonization, energy transition, and improved efficiency. So we've spent a lot of effort in trying to make sure that in the room, of course, we will have exciting cork suppliers there and project developers, but we've brought in corporates who have already been active in the space. We're bringing in companies who have heard about CDR, but maybe haven't made their first purchase yet. And they think this will be a venue where they can learn about what's happening in CDR. We're really lucky to have the VP of Environmental Sustainability from the Singapore Economic Development Board, EDB, to share the government's perspective on carbon markets. So that's Michelle Tan, and she'll be in conversation together not only with Ben Rubin, but also Daniel Clear, the CEO of South Pole. And of course, South Pole being a co-advisor to NextGen CDR will have ample knowledge and insights to share about CDR. And we're of course happy to have ratings agencies there to hear about the latest projects, and of course they'll be able to share their views and financiers. So we'll have representatives not only from the venture space, pioneers like Max Zeller from Carbon Removal Partners will be speaking, but we'll also have hopefully corporate venture capital people. We will have, of course, Standard Chartered Bank and others from the financial sector. And we're also really excited to welcome Mark Roston from Stanford University to be speaking, because he has been doing some pioneering work in trying to unlock certain structural issues in the carbon market to really hopefully make it scale a lot larger than it is today. That's the mix of people, and I'm probably forgetting a whole host of other contributors, but it is really something exciting. And then finally, of course, Singapore, I should highlight, is a important trading hub. So historically has been known for commodities trading, in addition to financial markets trading in general. But we're really excited to have a lot of important actors in the commodity and environmental markets trading space who will be there. So not only exchanges like Climate Impact X and Air Carbon, or ACX, and IDX, which is Indonesian exchange, but we'll have brokers and liquidity providers, people like Valaterra, Rene Velasquez, who everyone knows, from Carbon Exposure Project. We'll have ACT Commodities there, DRW Archimeter. The list goes on and on. So really excited for this, and we hope it really brings things to the next level.
It certainly does sound like a very impressive lineup. But to summarize perhaps briefly, what outcomes or conversations are you hoping that the summit will help catalyze?
Yes. So as I mentioned, our overriding objective here is to try to further raise awareness about what's happening in carbon removals so that we can get suppliers the visibility that they need, let experienced buyers talk about what they're doing so that new up-and-coming buyers understand the premise, understand that the market has transparency and durability, and then also for the financiers in the room to understand that this is growing and these are bankable kind of projects. And yes, we will have some government entities involved to hear what's going on, and perhaps that will give inputs to future policy considerations. So our goal is, it's an ecosystem meeting. We want participants from all corners of the market to be there, to hear what's happening, and then generate new ideas about how to dramatically expand the amount of carbon removal activity that can happen. Because obviously we need that. Without carbon removal as a key part of the net zero strategy, net zero is out of reach. So we're trying to address all these things at this summit.
Excellent. Alvin, I do have one final question for you, as it's our closing tradition, and that is, what are Puro's plans for the next weeks and months, perhaps? I imagine you guys are very busy, as it sounds, but are there any specifics that you can give us, like kind of as a sneak peek right now?
Sure. So maybe before I talk about what's happening in coming weeks and months, I'd like to tell you about what has been happening in the past month or so. So we have been gearing up for major expansion and work that we know needs to happen to scale CDR in the way that we've been talking about. So as I mentioned, I got in touch with our co-founders, Mariana and Antti, 3 years ago now, and it has been a great joy working with them, and they continue to lead our standard and external and client and stakeholder engagement. But we're also very fortunate to now have one of our longtime board members now step into an operational role as president. So Jan Willem Gerde has stepped in as our president. So that will give us additional resources and heft that we need at the ExCo level to focus on the growth that's to come. And we also brought in Ellen Brewer from SBTI to work together with Mariana on the standard. So these are important steps to give us the foundation to do what we need to do in the coming weeks and months, as you alluded to. So what is that? Well, we did recently announce that in the first several years of our existence, from 2019 till now, we were able to, on a cumulative basis, certify over 1 million tons of CDR, or carbon dioxide removal. That was a huge milestone achievement. We're really proud of the whole team coming together to be able to do that and work with all the suppliers in the market to make that happen. And of course, the demand that's needed to give those suppliers confidence to keep doing what they're doing. So now with our expanded team and having hit that 1 million ton milestone, what are we doing in the next few weeks and months? Well, obviously, we're going to look to do it again, but much, much faster. So we certainly hope that the next 1 million tons could happen by the middle of 2026. So that'd be a dramatic acceleration in the rate of carbon removal. And of course, that's just a step towards 10 million tons per year, eventually 100 million tons a year, megatons per year, and eventually the magic number, which is 1 billion tons a year of CDR per annum. So we are laser focused on doing all the things necessary that will get this industry to be a billion ton plus per year sector. So how do we do that? We have to, of course, continue scaling high integrity supply. So identifying those suppliers that are aligned with Puro standard and have access to the resources to make this happen. We're also, of course, going to need to launch updated versions of methodologies to help them take advantage of latest science and raise the bar on quality. But we're also going to be focusing on new methodologies. So a big focus for us this year, especially in the coming months, is going to be marine CDR or MCDR. So we recently had 2 public consultations, one on marine anoxic biomass storage, and as well as the direct air capture with ocean storage. Those are the first 2 MCDR that I anticipate we'll be able to offer, and there are others on the horizon. So that's a big, big focus for us. So hopefully that gives you a sense of what's to come from Puro. And maybe I'll conclude with one personal remark, which is, so I studied at Stanford University, mechanical engineering, as I mentioned, and it was quite interesting to see Stanford, for the first time, I think in 70 plus years, launch a new school. What was that new school? It was the Stanford Doerr School of Sustainability. So that was launched, I believe, in late 2022, first school in decades. And it's really amazing to see that at the Doerr School, of course, they're involved with all aspects of environmental research and scholarship. But one thing that they've pioneered is this idea about flagship destinations. You know, what are flagship destinations that humanity should be thinking about if we're going to really create a sustainable world? And it was really encouraging to me that the very first flagship destination announced by the accelerator within the Stanford Doerr School was trying to get CDR to gigaton scale at below $100. So this is exactly what Puro is trying to do. It's wonderful to see different parts of the global ecosystem aligned in that thinking. And that's our long-term destination, but the work continues in the coming weeks and months.
It's very, very inspiring words. Alvin, this was a great pleasure. I really enjoyed speaking with you today and appreciate your valuable insights and the massively important work you guys are doing at Puro. Thank you very much for joining us.
Really appreciate the time, Violet. Great to talk to you, and thanks so much for having me on the podcast.
If you enjoyed this episode of the Carbonsations podcast and would like to hear more conversations like this, please be sure to subscribe. We really appreciate the support.